Hey everybody, welcome to the Dollar Vigilante. Very happy to have on a special guest, and shockingly I've never had him on the Dollar Vigilante on our YouTube channel before. I'm incredibly stupid. I just never thought of it. I've known Doug Casey for about 10 years at least, and we're quite good friends, and I just never thought to have him on the Dollar Vigilante. I apologize for that, but we got him on now. I finally broke out of my stupidity and then realized, why don't I have Doug on our show? He's super awesome. For those of you who don't know him, and I'm sure most of you do, he very famous. He wrote a very best-selling book in the 1980s, I believe, called Crisis Investing. He's gone on to do all kinds of things. He's known very well for his investing in crisis sort of situations, and I know after this interview he's going to Zimbabwe, which is very typical for him. And interestingly enough, I'm going to Venezuela around the same time, so he's going to go see what it's like post-hyperinflation. I'm going to go see what it's like right in the middle of it. So interesting guy. Of course, Casey Research. He's also involved with International Man at internationalman.com, all kinds of stuff. Great guy. So Doug, very happy and so sorry I never had you on before. I don't know why I didn't.
Jeff, it's a pleasure. There are 7 billion people on the face of the planet. Obviously, you can't pick on all of them.
Well, you'd be right near the top of the list, so that's why it was so stupid of me not to think of this before. I don't know, it just must have been like a brain fart or something that I just never, I guess I just always, we've always talked, I've always known you, and I just never just thought, hey, why don't I have him on? He'd be one of the best guests we probably ever had on. Not to put any pressure on you, but I'm sure you will be. So let's get started though, because really interesting times right now, and of course you follow the markets very closely. And I'm going to get into what I heard about you buying precious metal stocks recently. But before we get into that, let's just talk about the general market. So last time I saw you was in the summer in Vancouver. We both predicted that in the next year it's going to be really bad. I predicted more short term, and actually we did see a lot of that in the third quarter of 2015 with crisis and collapse all over the place. It's rebounded somewhat. Then we started off 2016 just terribly in terms of the markets. What's your take on where we're at now?
I think we're right at the edge of the precipice, quite frankly. The analogy I always use is that we entered a gigantic financial hurricane in 2007, and we went through the leading edge of the storm in 2008 and 2009, and I'm sure everybody can remember how scary and how ugly it was. Now, since it's such a gigantic financial hurricane, we have a huge eye of the storm. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. But now we're going into the trailing edge of the hurricane, and it's going to be much, much worse and much, much different and much longer lasting than the unpleasantness of 2008 and 2009. So this is really going to be bad because these stupid governments are not just doing the wrong things, they're doing exactly the opposite of the right thing. So it's going to be Jeff, this is going to be the biggest thing since John Law in France and England before the French Revolution. It's a very big deal, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've said for a while, I think this is going to be well, I think it is right now, the most dangerous time in human history for capital. There's going to be a lot of it lost over the next few years, in my opinion. And governments all over are just confiscating, and what they're not confiscating, they're taxing and regulating it to death. You mentioned that the governments are so stupid. Do you think they're completely stupid, the governments and central banks, or do you think there is some sort of maybe even plan to collapse the economies?
No, I don't think there's a plan. We have to define the word stupidity. Most of these people that work for central banks and governments actually have high IQs. In other words, if they were to take a college entrance test, an SAT or something like that, you'd find that they're, 110, 120, 130 IQs in many places. I don't want to define stupidity that way. A better definition, a more useful definition of stupidity is this unwitting tendency to self-destruction. And that's what these people are doing. They have all these completely ass-backward ideas, and they're in a position to power to impose them on everybody else. And the worst part is that the average person out there who thinks about as well as a chimpanzee, quite frankly, he thinks, he's come to believe that it's the best and brightest, that's a term they like, best and brightest, go into government to be our public servants. But they're not. They're the most morally corrupt and lowest kind of people that believe in using force to control everybody else. And that's why they're attracted to the government, for the same reason that criminals are attracted to the mafia and gamblers are attracted to Las Vegas. You get these sociopaths that are attracted to the government. So of course they're going to screw it up. And they have this immense amount of power now, and they're going to use it. So this is very, very, listen, we're witnessing something of world historic importance. I just enjoy being here in Latin America, where I can watch it on my widescreen as opposed to watch it out my front window in the US.
Yeah, I didn't mention you're coming in from Buenos Aires. You just came from your other place that you have in Punta del Este in Uruguay. So you spent a lot of time in Latin America. You're a great place, Cafayate there. I've talked about it many times for people who don't know about it. Great expat sort of community, very luxurious, very nice. And so if you're ever down there, check that out. One of the things, Doug, that I've noticed is that, for example, you've been in this game doing this sort of thing for a long time, since pretty much the 70s. As far as I can tell. And you were on, for example, in the 80s, you were on Donahue. For people who remember that, that was a long time ago.
Thanks to you, I've got to say. Thank you, Jeff.
Well, it wasn't thanks to me you're on Donahue, but it's on the internet because of me. I had no idea you were on Donahue. I was 8 years old or something. So, yeah, we did find it and we put it up. We'll have a link to it down below. In fact, maybe I'll just play a clip of it now because it's so great. We'll find a good clip. We'll play it right now.
You have a very strong conservative philosophy woven through your book. In fact,
no, that's untrue.
Well, it's been suggested what we've got here is a political book with a financial ribbon on it.
There's a lot to that, because this depression is being caused by politics, bureaucrats, and so forth. So you've got to have a political philosophy in order to understand what's going on, but it is not conservative. I'm not voting for Ronald Reagan. Let me say that right now.
Okay, so you're...
I didn't say I was voting for Jimmy Carter either.
So well, who are...
Now nobody likes me.
Yeah. Who are you? We should say that we're taping one day in advance of the election, for those of you watching us after the election. We don't know who won.
Will we change the course of history with this conversation?
Well, no, but you brought it up, so if you're not voting for Reagan, for whom will you vote?
Well, first of all, I'm not voting. That's interesting. No, let me attack that. That is one of the foremost shibboleths and illusions of American society, that you have to vote. I think there are 4 good reasons that you ought to seriously consider it. I know that you hear all kinds of movie and TV stars tell you on the air that you should vote. Doesn't matter how you vote, but vote. Well, I'm here to say that voting in itself could be considered an immoral act. Why? Because when you're voting, all you're doing is deciding who decides who gets whose money. And I don't believe in that as a moral principle. I believe my money's mine, your money's yours, and that's none of the politicians' business, and that's what they're all about. So from that point of view, I think voting is wrong. Another thing is, it just gets your name into another government computer bank, and you can't use that. Third thing is, I think it's a misallocation of your time. By the time you register, go down to the polls and so forth, I think watching Hollywood Squares might be more fun. The fourth thing is it encourages them. I don't like what they're doing. I don't like to encourage them. But if I voted, I would vote for Ed Clark, the Libertarian.
So as you can see, it's very interesting. But the thing that really I see a lot of people say, because you've been saying this for so long, that we're headed towards destruction in general, although at the same time you say humanity is always rising. So what you're talking about, I believe, when you say destruction, is a lot of these current systems, the stock market and the financial monetary systems, is on the verge of collapse, essentially, if I read you right. But you've been generally saying this in general since the 70s or 80s. So a lot of people say, oh, he's been saying that forever. And I get a little bit of it, but because I just started around 2010 with the Dollar Vigilante, they can't say that so much about me. But they say, well, guys like you have been saying this since the 70s and 80s. What's your response to that?
Well, it depends on your time frame. And I'm an amateur student of ancient and medieval history. It's just something I'm interested in. So it depends on the time frame that you want to look at things from. And let me put it this way. I would say that as a civilization, the United States reached its peak in the late 50s, when it was characterized, let's say, by the 1959 Cadillac convertible. That was a car that everybody could aspire to, and practically any middle-class person could buy one. It was big, luxurious, and so forth. And now we're all driving little Toyotas. So what I'm trying to say is this, is that the average standard, in those days, look, the U.S. used to have 75% of the world's stock market capitalization. Every skyscraper in the world. The United States built 75% of the world's aircraft. The United States was head and shoulders, an order of magnitude above whatever came second. Now, the country's just an also-ran. So from a civilizational point of view, the U.S. has been going down in relative terms. Now, the average standard of living of the average American hasn't collapsed for two reasons. Number one is science and technology, like a great delayed flywheel, has continued innovating. After all, we've got more scientists and engineers alive today than have lived in all of world history put together. So that's helped a lot.
Unfortunately, some of those scientists are working for the governments essentially and putting out global warming propaganda. That's part of the little bit of a problem. Just let me interject that, but go ahead.
No, you're right. I mean, science is actually being corrupted by the state in exactly the way that you're talking about. You're quite correct. And the average guy, even though he knows nothing about economics, tries to produce more than he consumes just because, same way that a squirrel in the fall tries to save some nuts. But mostly it's about debt. And the important thing to remember about debt is that when you have debt, and the world is, everybody knows the world is awash in debt, you're either borrowing from capital that other people have saved over hundreds of years, or you're mortgaging your future to pay the debt back. So, yes, so that's why I say yes, as a civilization, the West is going downhill. And it has been going downhill for a long time. I mean, Europe is going into terminal collapse. I mean, that's a continent that needs to be flushed, and the U.S. isn't far behind. So, no, these short-term fluctuations, recession boom, this is important from a speculator's point of view. But I'm trying to talk about this from a historian's point of view. And now, as we're going into what I call the Greater Depression, I think everybody's going to see all this in spades.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any sort of predictions as far as what we might see in the next year? Just off the top of your head, some just ideas of what could transpire?
Well, the biggest bubble in the world right now is the bond bubble. With these negative interest rates, which I thought was metaphysically impossible, incidentally, to have negative interest rates, but it just goes to show. Now, this is the biggest bubble in world history. There's nothing that's even a close second. So that's going to be destroyed because, remember, bonds are a triple threat to your capital. Not only you have the interest rate threat from negative levels. I mean, people forget that in the early 1980s, the U.S. government was paying 15% for bonds. So you've got the interest rate threat. You've got the threat of the currency that it's in. I mean, the dollar is an IOU nothing. It's a hot potato. And the last thing is the default threat. Not necessarily a problem with U.S. government bonds because they can just print up more money, but all the other debt, you've got the default threat. So this is going to be a disaster. And of course, real estate, certainly in the developed world, rests upon interest rate and borrowed money. So it'll destroy the real estate market. And I don't know what it'll do to the stock market. Maybe as they destroy the currency, the stock market could actually go higher because at least that's equity of some type. But this is going to be a catastrophe for the average guy who's saving in dollars, if he can save at all, because the dollar is a dead duck.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is quite amazing, isn't it? I know you just mentioned that negative interest rates you thought were metaphysically impossible. Even when I started in 2010 at the Dollar Vigilante, I predicted a lot of the stuff that you're talking about right now and is going to happen. I never really talked about negative interest rates. I didn't think that was, why would anyone buy a bond if they're paying to buy the bond? But they are. What do you think's going on? Why are so many people even buying these bonds?
Because there's no place else to hide. You can't leave money in a bank account because every bank could be in a position of the banks in Cyprus where they just take your money, called a bail-in. I didn't think that was possible either.
Yeah, we're learning a lot of new things are possible.
Just take it. And you leave money in a bank, you're in effect loaning money to the bank and paying them to loan them money. It's a guaranteed catastrophe. I don't know what you can do except buy gold coins. And I suggest you buy small gold coins, the size of sovereigns or louis d'or, not even the Krugerrands and maple leafs. Why? Because crossing a couple borders recently, I carry these silver dollars or silver rounds, which are big and look like gold coins to an X-ray machine. And both times they stopped me and looked through it and asked me if I had any gold coins. So
really?
Obviously, I kid you not. So obviously the word has gone out to these people to look for people transferring gold coins. So don't carry the big ones, but if you carry the little ones, they look like nickels and dimes. And but this is very serious, and the war against cash is equally serious, where all over the world they're trying to take cash out of the system, where you have to pay by credit card or iPhone and no cash. And I can say this is the war against drugs, the war against terror. This is all complete crap. It's complete nonsense. But this is really serious. You put money in the bank, they charge you negative 0.5% interest per year, like in all of Europe, and it's a tax. I don't know when the average whipped dog, which is what most people are, they're just whipped dogs, is going to revolt. But there'd be nothing more salubrious than seeing Pennsylvania Avenue in between the White House and the Capitol lined 6 deep with crucified government employees on crosses.
On crosses, that's a nice touch.
But more likely that's going to happen to us. They'll do that to us than them because they outnumber us by such a huge margin. So forget about it.
Well, I'm like you. I don't plan to be around for it.
No, I want, like I said, I want to watch these crazy chimpanzees hoot and pant at each other. I don't want to be in the mob.
Yeah, we'll watch it on TV, hopefully. But getting back to about people buying these bonds that are negative interest rates, what would be your suggestion if you knew? You probably do know, but what would you suggest if someone had a fund, one of these big funds, has $10 billion in it? What would you tell them to be doing if you're telling them the best way to survive the next few years?
God, I would put the money into something that won't dry up and blow away. I think agricultural land makes a lot of sense. It's productive. It'll give you a yield. People are always going to need food. I wouldn't own bonds. I think I would own, I think the stock market, because of the bond market, is very overpriced right now. Maybe it'll become twice as overpriced before that bull market is over. But, I look at stocks. But I think you've got to be friendly to gold and silver and commodities across the board, frankly. I mean, everything, coffee, sugar, all these things are all very cheap. So I look at commodities much more than financial stuff at this point.
How is it? Yeah, go ahead.
Because the financial world, I mean, it's insane with these gigantic banks and brokerage firms having these rooms, these gymnasium-sized things full of traders, buying and selling. Hello, New York, buy. Hello, Chicago, buy. Hello, Los Angeles, sell. New York and Chicago are buying. This is insane. None of these people serve a useful purpose. The whole society has become over-financialized, where it's like, I think the number is 22% of the market is financial. In a free market economy, It would just be, 3-4% is a convenience. So this is a huge waste of capital. Everything the U.S. government done is a huge waste of capital. If I was president before I was assassinated, I would immediately get rid of 90% of all of it, and then work at getting rid of 90% of the 90%. Actually, I'd like to get rid of all of it, but you can't do that in the world. The degree of psychological aberration among the average person is so high, he actually thinks that he needs government. But no point in talking about that.
Yeah, because it's not going to happen.
We'll talk about that on the Anarchast. We can talk about these philosophical issues more.
Yeah, they're definitely not going to, no one's going to go in and reduce government by 90% anytime soon, as far as I can tell. So they're going to just ride it until it collapses, from what I can tell. But let's get back. I'm really curious about this question. I really like your answer about advising a bond fund manager who has $10 billion what to invest in. I think your advice to get into farmland and things like that is good, and the hard assets. But there was one Swiss banker who realized that he had something like $10 billion, I forget the exact amount, and he found out they're going to negative interest rates, and so he said, okay, well, I'm going to take the $10 billion out of the bank, and the bank said, well, no, you can't. So what would be your suggestion? How easy would it be to buy $10 billion worth of gold? You would know this answer way better than me.
I don't know. I don't think anybody's tried to do it. We think we know that the Chinese and the Russians are buying large amounts of gold constantly. So, and there's about 80 to 90 million ounces of new gold that are produced every year. So I don't know, but.
So you would suggest some of it should go into gold producers?
Yeah, I think they're very cheap right now. I think the gold mining stocks are at an absolute historic low. They're as cheap as they were back in 2001, the gold stocks. So, mining is a crappy industry. It's a 19th century choo-choo train industry. It's a ridiculous industry from every point of view. That's why people like Warren Buffett, he may be an idiot in other ways, but he's a genius when it comes to investing. That's why they never invest in mining. But I think it's an excellent speculation right now, being in the gold mining stocks. I would definitely put money there. I have.
Yeah, I just saw that Lobo, I don't know what he calls himself in real life. I call him Lobo.
Louis James.
Louis James, right. He just mentioned that you bought $1.5 million worth of gold stocks in December or something like that. So you're putting your money where your mouth is.
Yeah, I think I bought them to the market. I love doing that. It doesn't happen often, but once in a while you get lucky.
Yeah, that's always nice. Yeah, good timing for sure. You're already doing well, and it hasn't even started yet. So if things go the way that we expect. So that's great. So glad to have you on, Doug. I hope I can get you on again some point soon, not another 5 or 6 years, and we can talk more about these sort of things.
Well, maybe we should talk when the economy is in full panic mode. So we might be talking before the year is out, for all I know.
I think so. I have a lot of expectations. 2016 is going to be a complete bloodbath. So we'll see what happens. So for people watching this, I'm going to now interview Doug more just about anarcho-capitalism and philosophy, and actually just fun stuff, not just markets, over on the Anarchast channel. So check that out. But before we end here, just if you like this video, please like, subscribe, share down below. That's how we can get this information out there. There's not a lot of people who know what's going on, and I believe Doug is one of them. So really like to thank Doug once again for coming on. This has been the Dollar Vigilante. Stay safe out there.
You have all the major central banks, Japan, UK, Europe, America, all printing staggering amounts of money. The people who are getting that money, Jeff, are very happy, and their friends are very happy.
I believe in 2020 that we will be back into a rip-roaring, snorting bull market.
They may increase interest rates by 0.25% to kind of prove to the world how responsible they are.
Government is always mankind's biggest enemy. Throughout human history, it always has been. It's what destroyed Rome. It's what everything that's every empire has collapsed, and every war, and all the billions of people have been killed. It's all due to government. So it is always our enemy.